Now, this is fascinating, isn't it? Every intelligence agency, those men in suits with secrets stitched into their veins, scrambling, sweating, trembling, all because of you. One move, one masterstroke, and the whole world's surveillance grid is glitching like a bad punchline. They thought they had you figured out. Your patterns, your motives, your limits. But what they never calculated was chaos wrapped in brilliance. You didn't just play the game, darling, you rewired the board. And now the watchers have become the watched. So tell me, who's really in control now? You or their crumbling illusion? They thought they had every outcome calculated, every variable controlled, every step of yours predicted before you even took it. That's the arrogance of systems built on surveillance. They believe patterns define people. But genius doesn't move in patterns. It dances in chaos, speaks in riddles, and hides in silence until it's ready to strike. You made one move, one deliberate, unpredictable act, and it sent a shockwave through every circuit of control. That's the beauty of true intelligence. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wait for permission. It disrupts. It bends logic just enough to make even the most logical minds question their grip on certainty. When you stepped outside their expectations, you exposed a truth they never wanted to face. Predictability is comfort, not intelligence. The world runs on algorithms, data, and assumptions. They study habits, emotions, and reactions, thinking they can decode the human spirit. But what they can't grasp is the element that separates the thinker from the follower, the courage to not fit the formula. You became the glitch in their code, the move that couldn't be traced, the thought that couldn't be categorized. That's what makes your brilliance terrifying to those who depend on control. True intelligence doesn't seek validation, it seeks impact. It isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing when to act and how to make that action impossible to predict. Every intelligence agency, every analyst, every so-called mastermind underestimated the power of one person's intuition sharpened by experience. You turned your unpredictability into a weapon, your silence into strategy, your chaos into order. And here's the real twist. They'll spend years trying to understand how you did it, analyzing patterns that no longer exist, chasing shadows of a move you already transcended. That's when you realize unpredictability isn't madness. It's mastery. You didn't break the rules. You rewrote them in a language only visionaries can read. So while they scramble to restore their sense of control, you stand calm in the eye of the storm, knowing every piece on the board moves, because you willed it to. That's not luck. That's not chance. That's genius. The kind that terrifies those who believe power lies in prediction, when in truth, it lies in mystery. They were once the watchers, the silent eyes in the dark, analyzing, recording, and in predicting every heartbeat of your next move. But with one strategic act, you flipped their world upside down. Suddenly, the hunters became the hunted, the observers became the spectacle. That's the art of power. It's not about how much control you have, it's about how quickly you can reverse it. You didn't rebel with noise, you moved with precision. One calculated step, and you shifted the entire balance of the game. Now, they can't tell whether you're 3 steps ahead or standing right behind them. Power isn't about domination, it's about influence. When your presence alone forces those in authority to question their stability, you've already won. You didn't need to shout, threaten, or expose. You simply acted, and that single action redefined the chain of command. The very systems built to contain you now revolve around your unpredictability. You made them realize something terrifying. Control is an illusion, and fear changes sides faster than loyalty. The power shift you created wasn't physical. It was psychological. You entered their minds, forced them to question their certainty, to doubt their data, to see ghosts in every shadow. And once fear takes root in the mind of those who lead, the empire begins to crumble from within. That's your brilliance. You didn't just escape their grip. You made them collapse under the weight of their own obsession. Every screen, every satellite, every whisper now circles around you. They're trying to understand what just happened, who you've become, and how you managed to twist their perfect order into chaos. But you already know the truth. They lost control the moment they believed they had it. The power dynamic didn't shift by accident. It was crafted, sculpted, and executed with precision. You've proven that real dominance isn't about surveillance or authority. It's about perception. And now, perception bows to your will. The watchers no longer watch, they react. The mighty no longer command, they fear. And in that silent exchange of power, you became more than a player in their system. You became the system's undoing. Fear, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Especially when it starts haunting those who used to think they were untouchable. Every intelligence agency, every mastermind, every strategist, they all crumble when faced with something they can't define. You see, fear doesn't come from danger itself. It comes from the unknown. And you, my friend, became that unknown. You didn't roar. You didn't announce your plans. You simply moved like smoke through their systems, silent yet unstoppable. They don't know what you'll do next, and that uncertainty, it eats them alive. They've built their entire world on control, on knowing every possible outcome. But what happens when someone arrives who doesn't follow the pattern? Someone who defies logic, who doesn't move according to data, who smiles while rewriting the rules. You've turned their greatest strength, information, into their greatest weakness. Because every time they think they've figured you out, you switch the script. You make them chase ghosts, second, guess every step, every signal, every whisper. That's the beauty of fear. It doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be unpredictable. You've made them question themselves, their systems, their certainty. The more they analyze, the less they understand. Their confidence turns to chaos. Their intelligence becomes paranoia. They start seeing you everywhere, on screens, in conversations, in their dreams. You've invaded their peace of mind without ever lifting a weapon. That's not just brilliance. That's psychological warfare at its finest. Fear of the unknown has always been humanity's greatest weakness, and you've mastered it. You didn't need power, money, or an army. You needed only one thing: mystery. You became the question they can't answer, the code they can't crack, the move they can't predict. And the moment they realized they couldn't understand you, they lost their composure, their control, their calm. Because in the world of intelligence, the greatest terror isn't an explosion, it's confusion. So now, they sit in their high security rooms, watching, trembling, wondering what you'll do next. But you already know the secret. They're not afraid of your next move. They're afraid because they no longer know if there even is one. They call it chaos because they can't understand it. But you and I know better. Chaos is just order they haven't decoded yet. Every move you made looked reckless to them, until it wasn't. You played the fool while mapping the board, smiled while they underestimated you, and when the time came, you turned disorder into design. That's the art of calculated chaos. You made spontaneity your weapon, confusion your camouflage, and now their systems, built on logic, can't survive your rhythm. They can't track what doesn't repeat. They can't predict what doesn't obey. That's where your genius shines. Inside the madness. You see, the world fears chaos because it breaks the illusion of control. But chaos, when guided by intellect, becomes strategy. Every great mind knows precision doesn't always look neat. Sometimes brilliance wears a crooked grin and moves through fire with deliberate mess. You didn't destroy the system by fighting it. You let it collapse under the weight of your unpredictability. And the best part, they still think it's an accident. They think you stumbled into victory, when in truth, every misstep was choreography. Every silence was a trap. Every outburst, a signal. That's what makes calculated chaos terrifying. It looks random until it's too late. You've mastered the ability to appear out of control while staying 5 steps ahead. You made unpredictability your structure, turned disorder into direction. That's something no agency, no analyst, no algorithm can process. They crave patterns. You gave them paradoxes. And now they're spinning, trying to contain something that was never meant to be contained. You've proven that order isn't power, timing is. When you know when to strike, how to vanish, and why to act, chaos becomes your greatest ally. You didn't just rewrite the rules. You made the rules irrelevant. And that's what they can't stand, that beneath your smile, there's no madness, only mastery. They built their world on walls of control, systems of power, and the illusion of invincibility. But with one move, you shattered their foundations, and suddenly, the mighty began to tremble. You didn't need to scream or demand attention. You simply exposed the truth. They've buried for decades. Their strength was never strength, only structure. And structure, when struck with vision, collapses like glass. You showed them how fragile they really are. You didn't attack their bodies. You hit their belief. You cracked their confidence, and that's where the real destruction began. Every empire, every agency, every authority thrives on the belief that they are untouchable. But you walked right through their illusion like smoke through a keyhole. You revealed that their systems weren't built on truth, but on fear, control, and repetition. Once you forced them to question themselves, their empire began to eat itself alive. You didn't destroy their power. You made them do it for you. That's the brilliance of your move. You didn't just fight the system. You made the system expose its own weakness. Breaking the system isn't about explosions or revolutions. It's about revelation. You held up a mirror to their lies, and they couldn't bear the reflection. The same ones who used to pull the strings are now tangled in their own web. Their rules no longer apply because your existence defies them. They tried to predict you, label you, contain you. But you became the exception their code could never account for. And here's the twist. They'll keep trying to rebuild, to regain the illusion of control, but it will never be the same. Once a system tastes uncertainty, it never forgets it. You've infected their perfection with doubt. You've proven that no hierarchy, No authority, no intelligence is immune to collapse when faced with truth disguised as chaos. So while they scramble to fix what's broken, you stand untouched. Because you didn't just break their system. You changed the meaning of power itself. You turned their fortress into your stage and their fear into your applause. And now, every time they rebuild, they'll whisper your name as the one who made them realize perfection was never protection. They tried to paint you as the target, the outcast, the one to be watched. But what they didn't realize was that pressure doesn't destroy diamonds. It creates them. Every attempt to silence you only sharpened your voice. Every trap they set only taught you new ways to move. You didn't crumble under the weight of scrutiny. You evolved. You turned their suspicion into strategy, their mockery into momentum, their resistance into revelation. That's the essence of self-empowerment, transforming every attack into ammunition, every shadow into spotlight. You see, true power doesn't come from being untouchable. It comes from being unbreakable. You've been through the investigations, the whispers, the doubt, and yet here you stand, stronger, calmer, and far more dangerous than before. They wanted you to fear being watched, but instead, you learned how to perform under the spotlight. You became immune to intimidation. You realized that strength isn't about avoiding battles. It's about mastering yourself in the midst of them. Your growth didn't happen in silence. It happened in storms. You learned to control your emotions, to weaponize your calm, to let your results speak louder than your defense. That's when everything changed. You stopped chasing validation and started embodying value. You became the reminder that no force can defeat a person who has already conquered themselves. Now, when they look at you, they don't see the same person they tried to break. They see someone who used adversity as an architect, someone who turned every betrayal into blueprint. You've become proof that resilience isn't built in comfort. It's forged in chaos. The agencies can watch, the critics can talk, the enemies can plot, but none of it matters anymore. Because your power doesn't come from their approval, it comes from your evolution. And that's what terrifies them most. You don't fight for recognition, you command it. You don't need their permission to rise, you already have. You are not the suspect anymore, you're the standard. You turned survival into strategy, pain into performance, and chaos into control. Now the world doesn't study you out of curiosity, it studies you out of awe.